Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Today, I am joined by Jason Weening from all the way over in Canada. He is a father of 10. That's right, 10 kids. I'm really interested to have a chat to Jason and just see how he navigates having that many kids because for me, I know having two can be hard enough at times as much as I love them. Comes with its own challenges. But Jason, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Matt. I really appreciate the opportunity. So thanks for what you're doing for dads and everything that you do. It's awesome.
So let's get into it. Give us a bit of a rundown on the Jason Weening story. What brought you to this point? Give us a bit of your background. Away you go.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you. Well, yeah, I am like you. I'm working from home in my home office here, and there's 9 kids running around in the house somewhere. If you hear bangs and screams and drums or something like that, I'm trying to get as quiet as I can here. But yes, my wife and I, we have 10 kids, and we never planned on that, so to speak. We thought maybe we'd have 4 kids, and anyways, over time, we started reading and learning some different things, and realized that a big family is a great thing to have. And we live in the best time in history to have a big family. We don't have to go out to the outhouse. We can turn on the tap and get water. We don't need to pump it out of the well or go down to the river where we live anyways, and where you live as well. I know there are places in the world that do have to do that. But so yeah, we love it. Our brand new baby is about a month old, and our oldest is 18. She just left for school in September. But yeah, I work. I've worked in ministry. I've worked in business and manufacturing for about 10 years. Started a podcast and YouTube channel about a year and a half ago called Helping Men Thrive with my friend Ryan. And Matt, we were just talking about friends of ours that we knew who were getting separated, getting divorced, having hard times at home and hard times in their marriage and family, but they were winning at work. And there was just a disconnect there. And we felt bad as friends, first of all, that our friends were going through this. But also, we said, can we put content out there that will hopefully encourage dads and fathers in this, the most important organization that we're a part of, and that is our homes and our families. So we interview guys, we similar to kind of what you're doing, and talk about our mistakes, learn from each other's mistakes, and kind of go that route. So I'm excited about that. I just finished writing a fiction book for 8 to 12-year-old boys about dinosaurs and mystery and adventure. So that just released on Amazon actually this week. So that's kind of a cool thing for me. I feel like I'm just a regular dad, but now I've got a book on Amazon. So that's very cool. I'm excited about that.
How cool. So what was the motivation for the book? What forced you down that path?
Well, we homeschool our kids. They read a ton of books, and they were running out of books to read. So, the Hardy Boys, that's a popular like kids book from like 50 years ago. The boys had read all the Hardy Boys books. They'd read, we were going through the bookstore looking for good books, and the books for kids are like witches and like horror, like teddy bear things, and it was just like, is there not good books for boys and girls that promote family and promote adventure and courage and character? And I thought, well, we've read a lot of them. Maybe I can write one myself. And so I gave it a shot, and I just started writing, and now it's out there. So
Great. How long was that process for you to write the book?
well, I write about 500 to 1,000 words an hour. It's about a 30,000 word book. So it took me, 30 to 60 hours, I'm going to say, to write. And then working with an editor through like 11 versions, I think we're on back and forth. And I'm so sick of the book now after reading it over and over and over. But many hours. And it was about 2 years from start to finish, time wise.
Well, that's a time commitment to get that done. So, congratulations. That's very exciting. So I was reading through the questionnaire that you filled out for me prior to coming on the podcast, and you put in there that at one point you packed up and traveled the US with your family. What was the what was the inspiration for that? Because and how many kids did you have at that point? Because that would have been quite a quite a process to get that done.
Well, we had 9 kids. It was 2022, January of 2022, when we hit the road. And it was stemmed through much of the let's say government overreach that we were experiencing in Canada and becoming very uncomfortable with. And we made a decision to let's go over to the United States and see what we can figure out down there. We had friends who had actually been denied. So this is January 22. There are vaccination requirements, and in Canada, we were required to show paperwork to go into a donut shop and buy a donut. And I was very uncomfortable with all that stuff. Anyway, so we had friends actually who had been denied trying to drive across the border the day before us. So we didn't know if we would get across or not, but we did get across. And once we were there, we started to kind of figure things out. I lived in the States for 2 years when I finished high school, so I had a lot of network and connections down there. So we traveled around and we rented Airbnbs. We stayed with friends. We had a family that we stayed with. They had a big fifth wheel like RV trailer that they had just got, and they said we can stay there as long as we want, well, within reason. But we actually stayed there for about 6 months in South Carolina and kind of got connected to the community down there. Um, but yeah, it was awesome, an adventure. We went all over the place. We were at the oceans. We were in Texas. We were in Oklahoma. We were in Tennessee. So it was cool to expose my kids to a bunch of different places. And we sold our house while we were gone, so that kind of gave us some of the freedom to do this for a year. So I quit my job before we left, and then we sold our house while we were gone. So we didn't really have any ties, and my wife and I were talking. We always wanted to expose our kids to different opportunities. So Canadians can only stay in the United States for 6 months, and you can renew for another 6 months. So we did that for a year total. But then we had to get out of the country. So we went back to Canada. Things had kind of cooled down. There was a big freedom truckers convoy that kind of seemed to move the needle on some things. People around the world heard about that in some degrees, but think the government backed off a little bit, I guess we could say. We came back to Canada, but since we didn't have a house, I didn't have a job, we're like, what other opportunities could we take right now? And we decided to go to Dominican Republic for 6 months and show our kids kind of a third world sort of country. It's not real, depending where you are in Dominican, um, there's really prosperous places and really great places. But we connected with a bunch of missionaries that we met down there. We helped at an orphanage a bunch. We helped run baseball camps for kids in the community for a couple of weeks with the ministry down there. We brought clothes to school. So my kids got to see that there's people that live in a shack that don't have a fridge full of food that they can just open up and help themselves. So I hope in the long term that my kids remember that experience and that they're grateful for what they have here. So that was really our motive in doing that. I would have stayed in Dominican, but the kids wanted to come back, so I didn't want 9 grumpy kids on my hands, so we came back to Canada.
No, that's fair enough. That might have been a tough obstacle to overcome, 9 grumpy kids, I'd say. So it's yeah, it's such a cool thing to be able to give your kids those experiences at a young age, and I'm sure it's something that, especially for the older, like your older kids, that they will stay with them. I've done a lot of traveling over my years, and it's not something that I've done with my family yet. Well, I certainly hope to do, but it's definitely it's definitely something that it doesn't matter where you go. Just being exposed to different cultures is just such a powerful um, learning experience, I guess, across the board, regardless of
Yes.
what country it is. You know, the economic climate. Obviously, you want to be safe while you're doing that, but that's such a powerful experience to be able to give your kids from a young age. So that's great. What do you think the do you, what was the biggest takeaway for you from that experience, outside of giving your kids that experience? Like, what did you learn from that experience?
That's a great question. And like you, Matt, I've traveled around a lot on my own as well. And I've been to Africa a couple times and some different kind of experiences like that. So I didn't really have there wasn't a cultural shock in this trip for me. But what was interesting was practically as a dad with a whole lot more kids than most people have, going through the airport, renting vehicles. We couldn't find vehicles that were big enough for us. And so at some point, some of us traveled in a bus, some of us were traveling in a vehicle to get a place, to go to a place. So there were lots of frustrating, good opportunities to become a more patient dad, or just some things you just are out of your control. So where we were staying, the power would go out every couple weeks anyways, and it could be out for 5 minutes to a whole day. It was out, or a couple days, I think, actually, at one point. So just I hope there was some character growth in me as we were trying to navigate. One time I was out with one of my kids, we'd rented a scooter to go into town, and the scooter died in the middle of town. And I learned a little bit of Spanish through the times, but like, okay, here we are. Who do I call? How do I navigate this? And that's the thing, when you do these kind of out of the ordinary things, you get thrown into situations that you hadn't expected. Another time we got stuck on the side of the road on a mountain. I was driving with a friend late at night. It was getting dark with my three teenage girls, my friend and I, and we're like an hour from home and trying to navigate that and then get a tow truck. So I just learned to not worry about things in the moment. You've just got to kind of figure it out. So you call the people and you try the things you try, and none of us died, and we all made through it, and we have a good story. So I guess I learned to just not worry about stuff, and things will work out eventually. And it may be hard, and you may lose some money, it may cost more than you want, it may take more time. But yeah, just being able to be flexible. I hope I'm a little more flexible now than I was a year and a half or a couple of years ago before going through all this traveling with my family.
Yeah, that forced resilience is it's a beautiful thing, right? Like when you have no other option but to just sort it out. It's uh it's such a powerful experience, and like it almost leads into like a question I like to ask of people is like, what's an experience that you've had that at the time almost broke you, but now looking back on it, you actually see it as like a positive, a learned experience. So, like posing that question to you, what's an like? Is there an experience that sticks out in your mind where you go like that was almost like a defining moment, right? Like that's is there something that comes to mind?
Oh yeah, Matt. There's a few things that come to mind. I was watching a couple of your YouTube videos, and you were talking about failure, and I think talking to your kids about failure on one of them. And failure, there isn't a much better teacher in life than failure. And one thing, a story I've told a few times is I was working in sales. This was about 3 or 4 years after we had got married. I was a straight commission, bad sales guy, not making sales, keep expecting the months to get better and better. You had a gym. I think you said you've been self-employed. You know that sometimes the revenues, they rise and fall. Anyways, I was not making enough money. I ended up paying my mortgage using my credit card until I had maxed out my credit card. And then I stopped paying my mortgage for a couple months, changed careers, so I was making some more money. And my wife was super supportive to get out of debt over that time. And so we worked super hard from having no money and credit cards maxed out and missing mortgage payments to paying off all of our debt, paying cash for a giant 15 passenger, like huge van for all of our family to travel around with. But we traveled around in two vehicles for a while because I didn't want to borrow any money to buy a van. So we drove a little Honda Civic and a regular minivan when we had to go anywhere with our whole family. And we worked really hard to save money and pay cash for the van. And I called the dealership because I literally wanted to pay cash. And I said, will you accept like money, dollar bills? Can I come in with $20,000 and pay for this van? And they said, yeah, you can do that. So I went to my bank, and in Canada, we've got $5 bills, $10 bills, $20 bills. I wanted $5 bills because I wanted to like stuff a briefcase as full as I could with $5 bills and bring it into the dealership. But the bank doesn't keep that many $5 bills in their stock. So I had to settle for 20s. So I used $20 bills, filled a briefcase, not as full as I had hoped, and walked into the dealership. I brought my 3 oldest daughters with me, and I was like, "Girls, this is how much money it takes to buy a vehicle." And I walked in and put the briefcase down, and the receptionist was like, "You didn't really?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did. Here's the cash." And I opened it up. But I wanted to show my kids, and I also just did not want to get in debt or be in debt. And so those years, it was an 8 or 10 year period of working hard. My wife said she was out grocery shopping with the kids one day, and she wanted to go to the coffee shop and get a tea, but a tea was like $1.50. She said, "I can't spend $1.50 right now. We're trying to save and get out of debt." So she's awesome and a team player. It wasn't her fault we were in the spot we were. It was my fault, but she's great. I love her.
Awesome. That's yeah, it's so important to have a supportive spouse. Like I can very much relate to having skinny times financially, like especially when you are running your own business. And it's something I've spoke about on the podcast before, firstly when you start the business, but then also too what we had to experience, going through COVID, where our businesses was one of those businesses that got basically shut down overnight, being a gym business, where we had a 3-month period, even longer, not knowing when we were going to be able to reopen, where the money was coming from. Like, so completely relate to that. And for me, having my wife, who again, it's not even necessarily my fault, but it's definitely not her fault. She didn't make the decision for me to go into business. So, she was there to to I guess help me through it, like to get to the other side. And yeah, I definitely relate to skinny times financially. I think it's just part and parcel of being self-employed at at some stage, right?
Now I know you're asking the questions, but if you'd let me ask a question, like tell me about that time. Like, were you panicking? How did you cope with it? Like, what was the hope in the future? And like mindset wise, what was going through your head, Matt?
Oh man. What's a I guess the best way to describe it was like a duck on water, right? Where I had to put across, because it was a people facing business. So not only are we going through this period, but everybody who comes to us for guidance, like stress relief, like, this is kind of like our gym was kind of like a sanctuary for, at the time, the 150 people that we had that were members there at the time.
Hmm.
So while internally I was very much worried about like what was like the unknown, the biggest problem was the unknown. Like, I can deal with stress, and that period definitely made me a lot more resilient and a lot more tolerant to stress. But the thing that really gets to everyone, I think, when it comes to stress is that unknown. Like, we don't, when you don't know what the next step's going to be, or you don't know, you even don't know like how much of this you're going to be able to control, right? Like, when you don't know, like, if we knew at the start that this is only going to be for 3 months, then we can make plans for 3 months. But we didn't know that. Like,
Yeah,
initially,
right.
initially we were told that this could be like 6 to 12 months. And then it's like, then you've got all these overheads, you've got staff that you've got to pay. Like, we had all these wheels in motion. So for me, I guess initially in the early stages, I didn't really have the opportunity to really get too concerned about it, because I was too concerned about everyone else. I was like,
Hmm.
hey, how are we going to deal with this together? Or how are we going to get a product out there for people? And look, we had probably 3 weeks before the hard shutdown come on that I was able to at least put some things in motion. Like, I wasn't oblivious to the fact that this could happen. Um, we had a lot of health workers that were in the gym, so like we kind of had an inkling on um, not how. Look, I'm not going to go into my thoughts on COVID and the seriousness of the actual virus itself, or the vaccination process. But but I had an inkling, just due to those health workers, like where the government was potentially going to push this, right? So like I started putting things in place probably about 2 weeks beforehand. So like we had a semi plan, but then the biggest thing was just that unknown. So um, I guess the tactic that I use that I spoke and I've used this afterwards for a lot of stressful times, like when we stepped away from the gym, all these other things as well, where it's like just get up and just try and move it forward a little bit every day. Doesn't matter what that looks like just put the wheels in motion on something, and with that action, like you're going to get some level of clarity on the back end, right? And that's always been, I guess, my approach, as stubborn as it is. Like, stubbornness is can be a blessing and a curse, and that's that was kind of the approach I took. Didn't make anything like didn't make emotionally, there was a lot of things I had to deal with, but yeah, that was a very interesting period for a lot of people. And, we could have been a lot worse. Like we were able to at least pivot and transition into an online program, which I mean, eventually led me to the point that I'm at now. Um, so, while it was painful at the time, it was also a little bit of a blessing because it forced me to get better in something that I had neglected due to, focusing on other things. So yeah, that's my COVID story in a nutshell, which is something that I could probably do an hour podcast on my experiences over that time. Yeah, but
Well, I liked what
Matt,
you said, Matt. I just wrote it down. Like, put the wheels in motion every day. Just move the ball forward a little bit and a little bit. And I don't know. A friend of mine said this to me. I think it's out of a book. Actually, the book might be called The Gap and the Gain. And we sometimes look behind us at the gap or ahead of us at the gap. So, Matt has this big podcast and I'm not as big as Matt yet. And I'm trying to grow this thing. So I'm comparing myself to Matt and the Unstoppable Dad Project. And so if we're always looking at people who are ahead of us in the game, well, look behind you and look at the gain. So look at where you've come in the last 2 years. Okay, well, I started a YouTube channel. Great. Well, I wrote a book. Great. But look at the gain and don't always look at the gap between people that are ahead of you in the game, and look behind you and see where you've come. So that concept has always been good. And it's putting the wheels in motion every day, like you said, Matt, that just keeps making those incremental changes. So that's a gold
yeah,
nugget, man.
and how, like, how you position that to yourself, I think is just entirely up to you. But it's, and there's so much stuff out there about getting 1% better every day. Like a thing that a saying that I really like, and a guy that I've learnt a lot from a strength and conditioning point of view is John Wellborn. He runs Power Athlete, and he's a 10-year NFL veteran, super
Mm.
knowledgeable guy. Like, I've done a lot of his seminars. Like from a strength and conditioning point of view, he's probably been one of my most heavy influences. And he has a saying which is "move the dirt," and it relates to training. And it's like, as long as you move the dirt every day, we're moving in the right direction. Some days you're going to have a shovel, some days you're going to have a spoon, but the goal is just to move a little bit of dirt every day.
So
And like
good.
that for me is all it. And it doesn't matter, even though the saying is related to training. It's something that just carries over to everything in life, right? Because it's so hard
Totally.
when you're in these high stress environments. It's easy to just go, righto, today's a write off. Fuck it,
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything today. And I've always had that opinion that, all right, let's just do something. Let's do something that's going to move anything that's important to me in a positive direction. Might be business, might even just be family, might just be, hey, I'm going to shut the books on everything else I'm doing today. And today is just a wife and kids day. We're
Hmm.
going to go ride the bikes. We're going to go, have lunch somewhere. We live in a coastal area. So like the beach is literally 5-minute drive from where we live. So, we might go down to the beach and, have lunch down there or something like that. And it's just, it doesn't, we don't have to have this one track mind, I believe, on like what we're trying to move forward for the day. It can be our relationships. It can also be our business. It can be our health, whatever it is. Just trying to do something every day to positively impact something that's important to you, I think is just a powerful driver for myself, and should be a powerful driver for most dads and men. Like, what do you think on that?
Yeah, Matt. And what I like about what you said is that you didn't just relate it to your career or your work, but to your family as well. Like, are we trying to get 1% better in our marriages and in our relationships with our kids? Does that mean, for dads, we always have stuff on our minds. We got the next project, we got an interview coming up, we got a training session to do, whatever it is. And our little boy comes out from the yard and he's got a stick in his hands and wants to show us that he's got a sword or a spear or a gun that he's turned a stick into it. But if we're too busy looking at our phones and checking our emails and scrolling through social media when we have a little boy, tugging on our shirt here saying, Dad, look at my sword. It's like, well, that's what really matters. And so to try and not only think about getting better in our careers, but in our most important organization in underneath the roof that we live under with our wife and kids. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Matt.
Because that, like, if that's not right, that just bleeds into everything else, and I'm sure, you mentioned one of your motivations for kind of starting the podcast with your friends and things like that was because you had friends who were succeeding in career, but then struggling with what they had going on at home.
Mm-hmm.
What's if you had to, I guess we've kind of covered off one piece of advice, but if you had to kind of give one, and I know there's always going to be more than one tip, right? But one tip to dads who maybe want to try and start to prioritize more time for their family, what would that be? How, like, what's a usable bit of information that you could kind of impart to those dads?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind, Matt, is killing two birds with one stone, and what I mean by that is, I'm not an athletic guru like yourself, but I've done a couple Tough Mudder events, which I don't know if they're in Australia, but it's a 10-mile like mud obstacle course,
Yeah.
Tough Mudder and Spartan Race and all these things. So I've done a couple Tough Mudder races, but the last two that I did, my 15, my three oldest daughters have joined me on that, and they're 15, 16, 17 in that neighborhood. So what I mean by kill two birds with one stone is I'm doing something that is fun for me and enjoyable and a challenge. And not only am I doing that by myself, but now I've just pulled in two or three of my daughters with me. So we're spending time together. We're working on something that's challenging together, and we're enjoying time together. We're making memories. I'm killing like four birds with one stone by doing stuff like that. The other day, I brought one of my sons. I went to a city council meeting, and I'm thinking of getting involved more in local politics. And so I've brought three or four of my kids over the last few weeks to city council meetings. And so they're getting exposed to politics. And it may not be the most exciting thing in the world, but they're seeing how things operate. They're interacting with adults and they're spending time with me. And maybe we go and get an ice cream or something afterwards, or I'll give them some questions to think about while we're in the meeting. Like, who do you think? Well, I asked my 10-year-old son, who do you think is the most influential person in this meeting? Or who do you think the mayor was? And what do you think the mayor's role is in this meeting? So I think the biggest tip is incorporate your kids into your life. And if you're going to the gym to work out or you've got a meeting with the client, bring one of your kids along with you. And maybe they need to have a coloring book or something so they're kind of being occupied, but they're with you. They're seeing you interact. They're seeing something outside of school or outside of home of how the adult world is. So I really try to make the most of my time by bringing a kid along with me. I don't do it every time wherever I go, but I really try to bring one kid with me somewhere when I'm running errands, when I'm going to meetings, when I'm doing things. Bring your kids along with you.
Yeah, that's such a good tip. Like I do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, have done for 8.5 years, and my son now does it too. So like Saturday morning is like our time together because I go and train first and he hangs around while I train and then he trains afterwards and I hang around when he trains because they run the classes adjacent to each other.
I
And
love it.
it's something that he looks forward to every week. And I think I do honestly think that it could be anything that they just want to spend time with you, like, and
Absolutely.
you mentioned politics and things like that, and even though it might not be the most exciting thing, probably right now the kids are like, they're not going for the politics, they're going because it's time with dad. And so that's
Yes.
that's such a cool, I really like that as a tip because it's something that even when I don't have as many people to worry about as what you do. It's something that I definitely try and implement too, and it's one of the reasons why, like, some of the dads I work with from a health and fitness point of view, it's one of the inherent benefits that they get from setting up a gym at home or setting up somewhere at home, because
Right.
they don't actually have to go and train, but then their kids will come out, and my kids do it as well too, but they've both grown up in a gym environment with people. Like, I would take them into work with me, they would be my assistant coaches some days, like, things like that. But like, they'll actually come out and they'll do their quote unquote workout while I'm doing it. And I see that with a lot of dads that set that up at home. And it seems like innocuous time. I think, like, I was listening to an interview and they were talking, it was Jerry Seinfeld, and they were asked him about like the time, and he says he values that rubbish time more than any other time. Like, he calls
Mhm.
it rubbish time. It's time that you just don't think that it's structured, like, it's not structured play, but it's just time together.
Yeah.
And it's just such a powerful time, I think, for them to just allow them to be there with you and see how you operate, and
And
get an idea on the world.
the cool thing is, how did you say your son is 8? Is that what you said?
Five. So my
5.
daughter's
Okay.
my daughter's about to turn 9, and my son's 5. So
Okay. So you're about to get into like really awesome years where, as your kids get older, and this is what I'm finding now that my kids are older, we're doing things together, like the Tough Mudder I just said, but like in another 5, or I don't know how old you have to be to get jujitsu, but you'll have a partner that you can spar with or whatever as your kids get older. And now that's just awesome because you're both doing something you love. You're engaging in it. My 10-year-old son is going to be playing bass guitar. I've played drums for 30 years, but at church on Sunday, my 10-year-old son's going to be playing bass guitar with me, and my 12-year-old's playing electric. So now my kids are getting old enough that I'm playing drum. We're sitting and we're jamming together. And it's just so great, Matt, because things I enjoy, they're starting to enjoy. And we're leveraging the time together. We're getting life from it. They're growing in skills. Our relationship is growing. It's just so awesome. And I think you're seeing that with the jujitsu and stuff too, Matt. So that's great that your kids are involved with that. Love it.
yeah, it's great. It's especially for kids to try and, like, develop skills. Like, there's a line of thinking in, from an athletic development point of view with kids. Like, there's two major things where kids are going to be able to hone skills and become good at sports and everything. And it's opportunity. So it's opportunity to see this and practice it. And it's that exposure as well too. Like, it's just that if they've got those two things, they're going to be able to, get better at everything. So even just something as simple as, like you said, taking them out to run errands and do things. And it's got me thinking about, like, we'll go down to the shops, and I'll take my kids down to the shops, and I'll let them like I'll let them pay on the, like, they'll hand the cash to the cashier, or they'll pay on the FPOS machine, and they'll take the bag and they'll say thank you. And while it's all prompted, it's still giving them the opportunity to learn that life skill and to interact with people. And you be polite to the people that are serving you, like, they're helping you. You've got to, all these little things that are it's just got me thinking on that level of, hey, there's all these little interactions that we don't think are valuable experiences, that as they grow up, they just are.
Yeah. And you touched on it when you said opportunity and exposure. I heard another dad say to me once, okay, so the guy that said this to me, he has a bunch of kids too. I think he has 9 kids, and they all like play fiddles and like step dance and stuff. And like the whole family. So we were at one of their concerts, and the whole family's performing, and they're playing all different instruments. It's just like blowing my mind. But he said something along the lines of, you need to get your kids in the game. They need to get in the game. So if you're giving them opportunities to compete and you're exposing them to new things to learn, so my kids are going to be playing on a platform in front of people. They're going to be in the game on Sunday. And so it's like, we need to get our kids in the game, not just practice piano at home and you just do that at home, but giving them, if we can, giving them opportunities. I imagine you have tournaments or competitions or something in jujitsu. So those kinds of things where we can get our kids, get them in the game, so they're getting practice, in real life, in real exposure and opportunity, like you said.
And that can be hard for parents too, because it also means that you're putting your child in a position to potentially fail.
And that's great.
Absolutely, absolutely. How do you handle failure with your kids?
So I'm trying to remember where I read this. Um, but it was something basically, I think it was a lady writing, or I heard her interviewed on a podcast, and she said sometimes at meal times her dad would ask, "Where did you fail this week?" And so I heard that probably a year ago. And so I try to bring that up in conversations around the meal table is typically where it happens, and asking my kids, like, "Where did you fail this week?" And it could be getting a failing mark on a math test, but where I'm trying to push them is to try something new and fail at that. And I'll give examples. I'll start the conversation like, I failed. I was scheduled to be on a call today and I didn't write it down, and so I missed the call because I was not organized and didn't write it down. And so giving examples of my own failures to my kids, and they've heard the story about my debt over and over again. They're probably sick of it. But talking about our own failures, we're only human. We might be the moms and dads, but we make mistakes all the time, and just try to learn from the mistakes. One thing I learned from my own dad was being willing to apologize to our kids when we make mistakes and ask for forgiveness. And I've said it to my older girls. My oldest is 18, and I said, I've never had an 18-year-old daughter before, and I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to screw up, but I'm doing the best that I can. I'm on your team. I want you to win. I'm trying to help you, but I am going to make mistakes. So I just ask that you give me a break and just don't get bent out of shape. And I'm sure we'll have conflicts and stuff. I'm trying to do the best I can, but I've never had 10 kids before. So I'm trying to do it the best that I can, and I'm learning as I'm going along, and I'm going to make mistakes.
That's reminds me of a saying I heard with they say that you parent the younger siblings, but you grow up with the older one.
Yes.
And it's like I don't think that could be more pertinent to the situation that you're talking about, where she's having all these new experiences, but they're also new experiences for you as well too. Like,
Yes.
you're on that parenting side of the fence where you've never had an 18-year-old daughter before. And I think that we've got to give ourselves as dads like permission not to be perfect.
Totally. Because it's not real. It's not real life. It's not realistic.
No, no. And relating that, failure to learning. That's like one thing I go through in my house a lot too. Like, hey, we're going to fail, we're going to mess up. But what did we learn from it? And it's like, because my kids love learning. Like they both go to school here, and they love school. Like they just love learning, and it's like they love asking questions, and it's like don't ever stop asking questions. Even if it's uncomfortable, keep asking questions. But it's like being able to relate failure back to learning. Like I love asking them what did they fail at, and then dovetailing that into, so what did we learn from that?
I read a book a few years ago by John Maxwell. He's written lots of leadership books and things like that. But he has a book titled "Sometimes You Win and Sometimes You Learn," and it has the "lose" is scratched out, and it says "learn" on top of it. And so that is a phrase I use with my kids sometimes. Sometimes you win, and sometimes you learn.
It's a big saying in jiu-jitsu as well too, like where they talk about you either win or you learn, which, I mean, sometimes you can lose, and that's okay to lose. It just means you've put yourself into a position you're not quite ready for yet. And
Yeah.
so it's like, what steps do we then need to take to push to be able to win in that situation next time? uh that's awesome. All right. So what's the I know it's so hard to nail this down into one individual moment. And if you've got more than one, I'm sure, go on to it. But what's been the biggest highlight for you as a father?
What has been the biggest highlight for me as a father? Well, one of the biggest is, like I said, my oldest daughter, she left in September to go away to school. And I said this to a friend of mine after she left. You've done everything you can, for 17 years. You've tried to be a good dad, a good husband. And then she's leaves home and you don't know what's going to happen. Is she going to fall on her face? Is she going to get in a bad relationship? Is she going to fail and run away? Like, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? And I wasn't expecting any of those things to happen. But once they leave, that's where the rubber meets the road. And we were blessed. God has blessed us that she thrived when she left. She went to a music school and she loves it. And she's pursued like relationships with some of the teachers and mentors in her school. So she's going out with them and asking them questions about life and relationships and stuff. And I'm just like, wow, this is amazing. She is thriving. And it's been a year, she could fall off the rails still, but it just made me really grateful, Matt, and really appreciate, it just is a blessing that she really rocketed out of here and is really doing great. So it was just satisfying to me for me that my wife did most of the work and did a great job, but I contributed too. And it just made me really proud to see that even when she left our being under our roof, so I got 1 out of 10 that's working out so far, 9 more to go. We'll see how it goes.
That's I'm sure they will all be fine in their own unique way. I think it's something that I'm a little bit away from yet, and while it terrifies me at the same time, it excites me a little bit because it's like, hey, you're going to have to work this out, kiddo. Like that's okay. And I'm going to be here to help and guide you. But we're you, it's an exciting time to try and navigate the world on your own and find your own way.
Yeah, and to kind of contrast that, staying on the musical theme, my 5-year-old son is taking piano lessons from his 17-year-old sister. So, in a similar kind of venue, he's now excited because he'll call me over to the piano to show me playing like dee 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 dee. He's like, Dad, I learned this song. Dee 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 dee. And he's so excited that he learned a song on piano and he can play it by himself and he can read the music. So that is also just such a highlight and when you see your kids winning when they try something and they learn something new, it's so rewarding when you see your kids. You said your kids love to learn, Matt, and when you see them learn something new, it's just so great that they're getting the satisfaction, and it brings me as much joy as it does to them. I think maybe more.
Yeah, I mean, watching their face light up when they show you what they've done is just like it's just something that I don't think you can ever put into words what that feeling is when you see your kids just proud of the effort that they've put in to be able to achieve something like a new skill or a new level of something that they've been trying to do. It's such a good thing to be able to watch and see that, and like it fills my heart with massive amounts of joy. Like it's like that. I'm hoping that as I get older, like the looks on their faces when they do that is just something that I can hold on to for
Mm.
forever. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
and also too knowing that being able to they're putting in the effort to get better. Like they're not
Right.
scared to put in the effort. That's like
And
one
they're
thing
not
for
giving
me.
up. Like it does take effort, and they're
Yep.
willing to make the effort to learn the skill and not giving up, and that's a huge lesson.
Yep. And it's just it's such a big thing. It's been listening to a lot of stuff on parenting lately, and I'm interviewing a lady tomorrow who does a lot in the parenting space, which I'm excited about. But it's there's been a few Huberman Lab podcasts that I've listened to, and they were going through studies that have been done about praising kids and talking about how there's quite a lot of evidence out there where kids who have their effort praised rather than the results essentially are going to become more resilient. And it's like that's something that ever since I've heard that, I'm always like, they show me, let's say for example, your experience where they're showing you the things that they've learned on the piano. I kind of go to them, hey, like I'm really proud of the effort and what you overcame to get to that point. Because trying to breed that, hey, this is a good thing that you're working that hard. this is a good thing that you're getting to that point. The result is great, but the result's a byproduct of the effort. And that's parenting's a wild journey, man, as you know.
That's a great distinction, Matt, between celebrating the effort and celebrating the results. Because yeah, on Sunday he's probably going to play some wrong notes and you know what? That's okay. You're giving it the old college try, so that's okay.
Back to all the way back full circle to failure again. There we go. That's so on and I've stolen this tradition from a podcast that I've listened to quite a bit. It's the Diary of the CEO podcast. And what he does is he asks the guest before to leave a question for the next guest, not knowing who they're leaving it for. And when we ask it, obviously you don't know who's asked it of you. So the question for you is, what was it like for you when you first asked out your wife?
That is a great question, Matt. Wow. Now I've got to think of a better one than that, but that's going to be tough to beat. What was it like? Well, truthfully, there were two girls that I was going to ask out to our company Christmas dinner, and they were actually both named Allison, ironically. Anyways, one of them I knew wasn't available that night, so I couldn't ask her. So I asked my wife, and I was very scared. I think I was 16, and I was just beating around the bush. Like, I did not ask the question. We had to pick the menu. Like, do you want chicken or beef or whatever? So I was asking her all these questions, and just finally, after asking her like what she wanted to eat, then I was like, hey, the reason I'm asking all these questions is because our company Christmas dinner is coming up. And so then I finally did ask her to come to the Christmas dinner with me, and we've been married for almost 20 years now. So I guess the strategy worked.
It did. The rest is history.
Yeah.
Well, Jason, I really appreciate your time. I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's been great. Do you want to let everybody know where they can find you, your website, your book? Like, let everybody know stuff that you've got going on.
Yeah, thanks, Matt, for the opportunity. So my website is heydads.ca. .ca is the Canadian kind of website thing. I think .au is probably the Australian one, if I'm not
It
mistaken.
is. It
So
is.
heydads.ca is my website, and you can find all the podcast and YouTube stuff there. My book, I got one right here. It is called Danger in the Jungle. Riders of the Lost Reptiles is the series, and it is about two teenage boys that ride dinosaurs and have adventures. It is available on Amazon, Danger in the Jungle. So I'm excited about that. It's going to be a trilogy, so this is the first of 3 books. And heydads.ca is where you can find all of my stuff.
Perfect. Jason, appreciate your time. Thank you very much. And we'll hopefully do this again soon.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.